Growing up and watching Spider-Man for the first time wasn't like it was a surreal experience as I got older, and I never really understood why. It's a great movie on its own. You have Spider-Man on the big screen, and I don't think before then there was any real life adaptation that had captured Spider-Man so well. But the biggest piece of that movie is when Uncle Ben's in the car with Peter, and they're just talking, and he says, "With great power comes great responsibility." And it's kind of almost in a sense that Uncle Ben knows that something's happening in his life that's changing him at a very fast pace. And even though he doesn't understand, he knows that there's a lot of there's a lot of responsibility onto Peter now, right? Not only is becoming Spider-Man, he's getting these new powers, he's getting these new ideas, abilities, he's being influenced in all these ways, you know? His powers can enable him to either help people do good or he can do bad things and actually completely get away with it. So that being inflicted on a young 16-year-old kid's mind is it's a lot to process. But in Uncle Ben's mind, he's seeing that either way it goes, that Peter is very smart, he's very brilliant, and he's also having a lot of consequences because of that. And he doesn't want him to go down the wrong path of his life, and and not just mess it up per se, but just use his powers, his brain powers for good, right? So it's kind of when you look back, you're like, damn, it goes to a really deep level, and just on a deeper note of what and who Peter Parker and Spider-Man are, right? It's a really deep movie if you have a chance to go rewatch it. But the reason why it kept sticking with me through all these years in particular is because my parents were co-separated or separated since I was a baby, right? I've never seen my parents together or anything of that nature. They always got along, they co-parented me, I would say, just fine. No real issues there. I would say though, whenever my dad he would come pick me up, spend the weekend over with him. I would go every other weekend to go spend time with my dad. We would go hang out, and when the weekend ended, he would drop me off at my mom's house. He'd always tell me, "With great power," and then I would always finish the sentence, "comes great responsibility." Every single time that happened, I don't know how many times I said that. It pretty much got to that point when you're like a little kid and you just like kind of want to, you're like, oh, I got to say this again. And he would look at me and smile. He's like, yep. And I didn't know what he was doing really at that time, obviously, but he was really programming me from a young age to understand that. And almost in a sense, my own father was Uncle Ben. Like he saw that I had great potential. He probably saw that I was you know, a kid that was gonna understand things maybe better than my peers or even better than the rest of my siblings at the time. And I didn't really understand that until I got older, right? I came from a very chaotic household. There was a lot of things going on. I was always the responsible one because I was always the one that was dependent on, that could have that sharper attention to detail, that could corral all the rest of the siblings. I led by example, was obedient, behaved. I was always that kind of kid. So I always got placed with like, teacher at school, hey, if anybody talks, write their name down on the board. Or, you're the line leader today. And I didn't like that because I didn't like having that focal center of attention. I didn't like the fact that if things went wrong, it would be on me. And I also didn't like the fact that I didn't know how to garner the respect of people unless I just really didn't know. Like I wasn't really comfortable in that position, right? And you don't ever really feel comfortable in that position. Even now, I don't think. I mean, in my professional life, I'm starting to be placed in certain positions to have influence, to be a leader. Because when people hear me, they stop, they hear me talk, they see how I run and process things, and like I said, attention to detail. In my mind, and I'm sure some of you can relate, in my mind, I'm just going about life the way I was raised or the way I kind of grew up to process things. But to other people, they never really had that influx of responsibility. And if they did, it was quickly abused and removed from them in some aspect, whether they realized it or not. So as I've gotten older to this age, right, I've been in many positions, right? In relationships, there are many women that have, approached me in certain ways I that I could have gotten away with, seeing multiple women at one time. And, at some point when I was younger, I was kind of like in Spider-Man 2, where he kind of gives up the suit, right? He throws it away. He's like, I'm done being the good guy. I'm done looking out for those that, really like are taking advantage of this, right? And to kind of parallel that to my own life, I was just quote unquote the good guy playing by the rules. I did fall into the red pill ideology a little bit, and rightfully so, because of the way I was thinking and processing things at the time. You see that people that are not doing those things are getting rewarded. So you sit there and you scratch your head like, man, and you get penalized for it to an extent too. So you're like, man, what is going on? Like, why can't I have those things? Why are the people who don't do the right thing get rewarded? That's such a frustrating feeling to kind of come across as a young man, right? You do the right things and you don't get rewarded. You see somebody that doesn't do the right things, they get rewarded. And so, I kind of saw that, though I was getting the way of, talking to multiple girls and kind of, in a sense, being manipulative. I didn't really, that wasn't who I was. I was getting the things that I had thought that I wanted, and I didn't even like the results to the extent that I wanted to, because at the end of the day, I was only feeding my own ego, and my own ego wasn't enough to actually satisfy my soul, right? It was the choice of stripping. You trade your soul for your ego, and that's a pretty high cost, and you don't really realize it in the moment. Anyway, so my father always told me that, with great power comes great responsibility. Obviously, borrowing it from the movie, I grew up with that mantra, right? And now at 28 years old, you know, um, some people would say successful. I live on my own, and I live life. I feel like by my own means. I feel like I've not that I get everything. I think there's still so much to learn about life, but in regards to the power that I have, I make a decent income. I'm a decently charming guy. I think when it comes to dating and relationships and that sort of thing, I understand. I've had that experience, so coming across another woman, or in that regard to date, and just understanding that you have infliction and you have power. When somebody really likes you and a woman really likes you, that's a powerful feeling. You have control over another human being. That is almost like a drug in of itself. And I'm gonna be honest, I think that's the reason why a lot of these red pill guys get so lost in that. And so that's just in one area. Imagine when you're making a lot of money, right? You're making a lot of money. Money can buy people very easily. Money can buy people to do things for you. Money can buy people to keep people away from you. Money can buy a lot of things. So that's the allure at the end of the day with having and making money. I don't think a lot of people realize, why these billionaires and millionaires and all these people are, they have the stigma of being evil or having that tag on them. And it's not, whether or not that's right or not to have that much amount of money is a different topic in of itself. But just to go back to the main point, it's just the perspective of that, but the true raw reality that is a potential, right? So as you kind of grow older, you start to kind of realize when you're younger, you don't really have much responsibility because you don't really have a lot of power. You're a kid. You just go to school, you play Xbox, you just got to get decent enough grades, or even not decent enough grades if your parents don't even really care. So you don't have much metric responsibility of life. But as you get older, things change, man. You got bills. You gotta live somewhere. You gotta eat. You gotta feed yourself. You gotta take care of yourself. You gotta groom yourself. You gotta exercise. You know, you want to have a family. Most of you, I would think one day, most people want to be in a relationship, right? Most guys, they want a girlfriend. Most girls, they want a boyfriend. So things start to change very, very fast. And so, you start to want to attain those things. And by attaining those things, you have to assume more power in one way or another. And sometimes that literally means making more money, being more physically stronger, being more mentally stronger, going through challenges and obstacles in life that test your discipline, just your overall ability to maneuver around different social situations, even, right? A lot of awkward situations. I kind of love awkward situations because that always gives me the experience and ability to maneuver different times, different areas of life, right? You know, when something's awkwardly happening, that's a moment for you to steer the conversation or steer the moment into something lighter or greater, or to remove the tension from the room, right? That's a power. Being able to realize that when everybody else is unequipped to do that, that's a power. You can use that to your own leverage and your own ability, or you can use that to actually influence the situation to benefit everybody. And I will say this, because I don't think I've even mentioned this so far in the video, that comes at the expense of yourself many times, right? You know, you could use it to leverage and make yourself greater and make your pedestals taller and, you know, sound better. And there will be many people who wouldn't blink an eye, right? They wouldn't second guess that at all. So, but many times, right, if you want to be that person that at the end of the day, you maintain your soul, your honor, your integrity, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say you're going to get rewarded all the time, but I'm going to tell you this. When you do get rewarded, it's a great feeling, but the greater feeling is going to bed at night, knowing that you did the right thing and knowing that you're changing somebody's life potentially, or you made somebody's life a little bit easier. Because so much complaining, right, is really done by people not wanting to do the right thing, right? If there are always going to be people that do wrong, that's never going to go away, right? But we have to counteract that by people that are doing the right thing. So, you know, I'm not saying, you know, be a walkover guy or a simp or anything that to that nature. Don't allow people to walk over you, right? Spider-Man is not a punk. He doesn't allow people to walk over him. He just, when that happens, when people try to get one up on him, he just treats it, he just has fun, man. He treats it like a silly little game. He just, you know, pats the villain on the head in a sense. He doesn't take it too seriously. The only time he starts taking it really seriously is whenever lives are at stake. People can get injured, people can get hurt, right? That's whenever that muscle starts to get flexed, you know? And up until then, people are making silly, empty threats. They're not really hurting anybody physically. They're just doing things. They're even insulting him, calling him names. It's like whatever, you know? You do the right thing. You go to bed knowing that you did the right thing. You let people deal with the grievances that they have with you on their own. And it's crazy because I'm saying this right now in front of a freaking video editing thing, recording my voice onto a screen. But I've never really thought about this, right? I've never really had these ideas conceptualized up until this point. So always remember, right? With great power comes great responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility, right? It really just extends and flows into many different areas of your life. And once you realize that, you can actually start taking more power into your life because you understand that, you know, you won't run away from the responsibility anymore. It's inevitable. You can't have a lot of money and have no responsibility. It just doesn't work that way. You can't be a charming guy or a guy that can attract different kinds of girls and go on these dates and stuff and, you know, not have a responsibility as a human being to treat people correctly and right, even at the expense of your own satisfaction and pleasure, right? So that's it. That's all kind of the only point I wanted to make. I just had this idea come up in my head before recording this video. So yeah, guys, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like if you like, don't if you don't. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.